This is the Samsung Galaxy S8, what they call Black Sapphire 64GB phone. This is Samsung's latest and greatest Android phone. Now, included with the phone here are the instructions, which is really just pretty much nothing manual. A Type-C charging cable, a wall adapter, a Type-C micro USB adapter, a Type-C USB adapter, and a set of wired headphones. For me, I've been personally using the Galaxy series of phones since the S4, with my most recent phone being the S6, the 64 GB version. And although I've had my complaints about each version, I've pretty much been satisfied with the Galaxy phones. And after Samsung recently had a buy one get one deal, I really couldn't pass up trading my S6 in for the new S8. Now, this S8's come a long way from the, in terms of design, from the cheap plastic backing that the S4 had that chipped when I had it. It's similar in design to the S6 Edge, the one body design with the rounded edge screen like the Edge, although this is slightly slimmer and a bit longer, which makes it a bit easier to hold even with a case on it than the wider S6. One of my issues I've had with the Galaxies, especially since the S6, was the non-removable battery, and that really hasn't changed here. That seems to be the trend for phones these days, is to make them where you can't change the batteries. But at least the S8 is water resistant as a benefit from that design. I'm still not particularly happy with not being able to change the battery. For me personally, I typically keep a phone longer than 2 years, although in this case I didn't keep it much over 2 years because of this deal that Samsung had. But I really don't like the fact that I'm limited to the number of cycles on a charge of a battery. One personal recommendation with this is I try to extend the battery life by only charging the phone when it's less than 10%, instead of plugging in any time. I found with my S6 that extended the battery life, and the battery life of my over 2-year-old S6 was in pretty good shape. So one of the biggest complaints that I had about the S6 is the lack of an external card slot. And I'm happy to say, although it'll be pretty hard to see here, that Samsung has brought it back, the card slot back on the phone. It's actually here in the same area where the SIM card goes. It's in the same slot, which is a little bit of a pain, but at least they brought the card slot back, and it's capable of a 256 gigabyte card. So it's hard to run out of space with a 64 gigabyte phone and a SD card that you can put 256 gigabytes into. So my biggest issue in design, though, with the S8 is not with how they've changed some of the the missing buttons. Like, for example, the home button is gone. I don't actually miss that at all. It's been replaced by a home screen button on the screen itself. But the one issue that really bugs me is this really poor location for the fingerprint sensor, which is right by the camera on the back side of the phone. One of my favorite features of the S6 was the fingerprint feature to unlock the phone or unlock certain apps. It's a great time saver, but oddly, though, Samsung puts this sensor in a really difficult to reach location. It makes it hard to find a lot of times, although I've had a little bit of practice, so I'm getting better at it. But it's really in a difficult location, and you always seem to smudge up your camera lens by hitting that location. And if you add a case like the OtterBox, which I have for this phone, it makes it even less accurate and harder to get a good read on. Maybe with current technology, Samsung just really couldn't squeeze it into another location, but I think they could have thought out that location a bit better. It just seems to be in an odd location. I really wish they would somehow bring it back to maybe the bottom of the phone somehow, or something on the next design of the next Galaxy. Now it does add a iris and fingerprint method, or I'm sorry, iris and face print method of opening the phone. I really don't find that very practical or as accurate as the fingerprint sensor, and you kind of look kind of goofy and obvious. That's what you're doing about opening your phone. So if you really don't want to be obvious that you're opening your phone, those aren't really good options. Now, since my S6 used the latest Android operating system, there's really no major features that are really big difference makers to me in this design as opposed to the S6, what it had. There's a few additions here, like the edge feature, which can be kind of neat, I guess. That kind of thing is okay, but there's some odd additions too. Samsung adds Bixby, which is activated by this button here on the side. That to me is another version of Google Assistant. It seems to still kind of be in development and doesn't always work as intended. I mean, I guess it has its uses, but I personally didn't find it, always beneficial. And some of the, other apps that Samsung adds on its own onto the phone, I didn't really find necessarily as beneficial, or duplicates of what you could already get on Google, the Android operating system. So, one slight change that I noticed in the operating system is that instead of having a button here on the screen for accessing the apps, you swipe up. So that took a minute for me to get used to, but I mean, it's not a huge change that would make me not like the phone. There are a couple additional OS security updates that the phone has when you initially start up. At least it does on the Verizon network, so keep that in mind. That those do take a couple of reboots, and you probably should do them right away because they're mostly security updates, I believe. Now, the curved screen, as you can see here, looks great. It has a very sharp, beautiful, high-resolution screen. The phone is quick with the apps. It's runs more smoothly than the S6, of course, because it's an older phone. Now, with this has a harder Gorilla Glass, a new version. But even though it uses a new improved version of the Gorilla Glass, a good quality case is essential to protecting the curved edges of this screen. It is susceptible, to me, in my opinion. That'd be the most likely areas that you'd get a break. So a good case is important. I personally used a wallet case because I think that's better than an open face case in this instance, because the one thing I found is that the curved screen protectors for these screens tend to lessen the sensitivity and make them less accurate. So it's actually probably better to go with a wallet case without a screen protector for that very reason. The battery life on this is better. It has a larger battery than the S6. You can go up to about 2 days depending on what you're using it for. At least I do on the battery. The camera photo quality is good, but for whatever reason this only has one lens on it as opposed to two. I'm personally not a big phone person that takes pictures on the phone, so that isn't a huge thing for me. Now the one thing about this, of course, is with the S8, all those micro cables that you have are pretty useless since the S8 uses now the Type A or Type C standard cable. But at least Samsung provides one adapter for the old cables, which makes it a little bit less painful. But it would have been nice if they'd have kind of added a second one, because most people have three common areas that you charge your phone: your home, your car, and your office. So it would have been nice for an extra one. Now this is expensive, but what phone is it these days? But if you can catch a deal like the BOGO deal that Samsung recently had, this is a great one to get. And overall, other than the bad location of this fingerprint sensor, this is a sharp-looking, well-designed phone, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars.